It is 1942, and the war between Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia is approaching its climax. In the skies over the Russian countryside, Messerschmitts are hunting for prey. But in this sortie, one of their own would take a hit, and the German fighter is spotted for the last time going down through the clouds. Here, the famous ace would be missing in action and his fate undetermined. But 60 years later, this long-lost plane would finally be found, with her pilot still inside. Now, while we wait for the engine on this Messerschmitt to get warmed up for the story, I'm going to give a big thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Raid Shadow Legends is an epic mobile RPG game, and here are the top 3 reasons that you should play. 1, because everyone loves a game that looks good, and Raid absolutely passes the visual test with flying colors. It simply looks and feels amazing. 2, the challenge of beating that next boss. There's no feeling quite like working hard and getting all of the strategy and pieces to fall just right to take down that daunting villain, and with Raid there are plenty of bosses to take on. And 3, the endless content. Raid is constantly adding awesome new updates and champions, so there is always epic new content coming, giving you tons of ways to play. In addition, if you download Raid now, you can join their egg hunt that's taking place as we speak. Scour the dragon's lair and find the hidden egg, and you'll be in for a chance to win in-game and real-life prizes, including Amazon gift cards. So if you haven't started playing Raid yet, what are you waiting for? Use the link in the description or scan my QR code here to get bonuses like the epic champion Talia, as well as energy refills, skin tome, and XP booster. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends, and now it looks like our engine's hot, so let's jump into the story. The ace at the center of this incredible story would be a German by the name of Friedrich Beck. His story is quite the unusual one. Beck was actually, by most standards, too old for a combat position in World War II. Born in 1908, he first joined the German army in 1926 as a part of the cavalry. After a 9-year tenure here, in 1935, he traded his horse for a fighter and joined the Luftwaffe. He was not naturally gifted as a pilot for multiple reasons, but this did not stop him from flying and moving up through the ranks. By the time Adolf Hitler invaded Poland and started the Second World War in 1939, Beck was a 31-year-old pilot, and this placed him beyond his combat years, so he was, at this point, instructing young aviators at the German Air War Academy. But while he was here, he would become good friends with another famous German pilot, a man by the name of Werner Mölders. Mölders would eventually go on to be one of the greatest pilots in the Luftwaffe and at one time its highest scoring ace. Because the two became such good friends, when Mölders was given a commanding position in JG51 in the summer of 1940, he arranged for Beck to be transferred to his unit as a combat pilot. Upon his arrival later that year, he would be assigned to fly the Messerschmitt Bf 109. By this time, at the age of 32, his eyesight had begun to deteriorate because of his age, and his reactions were certainly not as quick as that of the younger pilots. But nonetheless, he was ecstatic to be given a combat role. Luckily, serving in a unit with Werner Mölders and other high-scoring aces, he had the opportunity to learn from the best and began to see combat in early 1941. In March of 1941, while battling against the RAF, he shot down a Spitfire for his very first kill. He would take down a few more British fighters before JG51 was sent to the Eastern Front as part of Operation Barbarossa. Here, like many of the other JG51 pilots, he dominated against the weaker aircraft and less experienced pilots of the Soviets. By the end of 1941, he had racked up an impressive 26 kills claimed, certainly more than he could have ever hoped for as an aging instructor just a few years prior. But this success was not without its trials. On the 16th of September of 1941, during a fighter sweep, Beck took a hit from ground fire and was forced to make an emergency landing. He was, however, able to survive and made it back to the unit shortly after, but with substantial injuries sustained. After his recovery in the spring of 1942, the war got even more intense. After multiple successful combat missions at the end of March, Beck took off for one mission on April 5th that would go down as his greatest moment yet. During the combat on this occasion, through 3 separate sorties, he would claim 6 Soviet aircraft destroyed, bringing his total claims for the war to 41. Shortly thereafter, he was given a break before being promoted to the commanding officer of a new unit, JG52, before being sent back into action in June. And this is where our famous mission would take place. On June 21st, Friedrich Beck, acting as the commander of JG52, now at the age of 34, took off for a low-level sortie east of Kharkov, Russia, with one single wingman. In this flight, the pair spotted a Russian airbase with fighters spread out on the ground. As the 2 Messerschmitts dove to attack, they opened fire on the grounded planes. Beck would destroy 2 parked aircraft before pulling up from the attacking run. But as they did this, Soviet anti-aircraft fire opened up and filled the sky with tracers. After returning, his wingman reported what happened next. As they were climbing following the attack, Beck's plane took a direct hit from flak. Then, just a few seconds later, it rolled over and went nose down. His wingman, however, was unable to see exactly what happened next, as he himself was attempting to climb away from the fire. Obviously, he saw his leader's plane take a hit and roll towards the ground, but he was never able to confirm that it had crashed, nor was he able to give a detailed location of where the 109 ended up. So, afterwards, when the commanding officer of JG52 did not return, he was listed as missing in action, and this is how he would stay for the next 60 years. Fast forward to 2004. Now, the information on this discovery is actually quite vague. Being that the wreck was located in Russia before social media, it has been very difficult for me to try and locate any of the details of the wreck. But what we do know is this. In 2004, a road was being constructed near a Russian town by the name of WWII. As construction was underway and grading was being done, a discovery was made. As dirt was being removed, the wreckage of an aircraft appeared in the ground below. Upon further investigation, it was clear that this was a Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighter, and as they looked closer, the body of its pilot was still visible inside the wreckage. After an ID was made on the plate number, it was confirmed that this was a Bf-109 F4 with a white 4 on the side, the plane of Friedrich Beck. Eventually, a backstory was able to be put together. Apparently, when the German ace was hit by anti-aircraft fire, he was likely injured or killed in the cockpit, or the ability to control his plane was seriously hindered. Because of this, the aircraft went nose down and crashed into the terrain below. Now, normally when a fighter plane crashes into the ground with an incapacitated pilot or loss of control, the impact completely destroys the structure of the plane. But this apparently was not the case for Friedrich's wreckage. With this excavation, the pilot was able to be located and the plane was able to be ID'd. This is likely primarily because the location that this aircraft crashed in was actually a marsh, a wetland with soft, muddy ground. In this particular case, the marsh likely cushioned the impact of the crash and helped to preserve much of the plane and her pilot. In addition, this also explains why he was missing for so long, as marshlands are typically difficult to traverse or develop, especially with the cold winters of Russia. But finally, this crash was discovered, and the conclusion to this story could finally be told. Friedrich Beck, the senior ace and commander of JG52, was hit by anti-aircraft fire and killed during this sortie over WWII, where he perished inside of his fighter, and it was there that he would remain for the next 60 years. Comment what you think of a find like this, and please consider subscribing.